Hello, everybody. This is Jalen Turner. I am a graduating senior communications major and psychology minor here at HT. The title of my hybrid essay is Color Me Smart, Color Me Educated, as you can see. The topic of the essay is the lack of diversity in teaching history and culture, specifically in primary school, and kind of the ripple effects and how that affects us. A lot of what I've talked about this semester is inequality in education, and diversity and lack of inclusion in education. And so I tried to find a common ground between communications and psychology. So I believe this is the common ground because it talks about the messages subliminally that we receive based on separatist attitudes and kind of how that psychologically affects us and affects our academic and economic success. So before I begin to talk about the essay itself, I went around and asked some students and faculty and staff what they thought about their primary education as far as being taught their history and culture. So let's flip over to the video and see what they had to say. Do you feel like you were educated on your culture and history in primary school?
Not at all. Yes. I went to a Seventh-day Adventist school, and most Seventh-day Adventist people are Caribbean descendant. So I had teachers who always educated us about what you learn in college, basically about Christopher Columbus and stuff like that. So I learned that at a young age. Private education matters.
It does, but see, I went to a public school here in Austin, Texas, and it was diverse, but Black folks don't learn about true history. You're biracial.
Do you feel like you were educated about your culture and history during primary school?
Educated wouldn't be the word I use. They made me aware of some things, but they failed to go into depth and really express America's dirty secrets, if you will. They never went into depth about things like Black Wall Street, how Mississippi had an organization based on preserving racism. So those are the things that they kind of left out after they mentioned slavery and kind of diluted the true story behind what happened.
Do you feel like you were educated about your culture and history during primary school?
I think when it came to like freshman year to senior year of high school, elementary to middle school, not really.
Why did you say not really?
We just hardly learned it. All we really learned about white men, presidents and stuff like that, history. I know we heard about Martin Luther King, but it was the basic stuff about slavery and
Do you feel like you were educated about your culture and history during primary school?
I believe that is an excellent question. During primary school, I believe that I was educated, but I believe it wasn't as comprehensive. So I feel that a lot of our teachers, they understood, the culture or the background, the history of African Americans, but in turn, they didn't make it as comprehensive to the youth, so we understood, or they could make a comparison between the textbook and the real world, in the sense that we could understand our struggle, or what our people went through in the past. So, in that sense, I think if they would have done a better job at educating us on our struggle, or helping us understand where we come from, then society wouldn't be the way it is today.
Do you feel like you were educated about your culture and history during primary school?
I mean, look at first of all, before I answer that, look at my clothing. Big drip on me with Brian James. This platinum pool, big legs on me, normal black jeans and everything like that. Anyways, I didn't know about no black history until I came to college. Freshman year, Solano Community College, African American history class I took, with Professor Tomar Johnson. That was my first time really learning about anything that had anything to do with the role we played in U.S. history. And that's all I got to say.
And why do you say no?
Huh?
Why do you say no?
All I knew about was Harriet
Okay.
Tubman. And they escaping from during the Underground Railroad. That's all I knew though. Elementary?
Do you feel like you were educated about your culture and history during primary school?
Oh no, they lied to me. They didn't tell me none of the truth. Not at all.
What they lied to you about?
Slavery, how we were kings and queens, how basically they feel inferior, so that's why they try to down put us, everything of that nature.
Do you feel like you were educated about your culture and history during primary school?
No. I just figured out what the word buck means yesterday. It's actually a racial slur from 1880. So, young buck, if you're watching this video or if this falls in your hands, you need to change your name because white people are laughing at you.
Do you feel like you were educated about your culture and history during primary school?
No. I don't think so.
Why not?
Because I didn't really learn much about African American history in primary school. We just learned about like American history. We didn't learn about African American history. Not in my primary school.
Do you feel like you were educated about your culture and history during primary school?
No, I think that's something that they left out of primary school. I think I started to learn about my culture more towards the latter years of my high school career and went on to college. That's when I started to learn about my culture. Before in primary school, in the beginning, I didn't learn much about it, so I wasn't knowledgeable on that concept.
Okay, so now that you've seen how some of the students and faculty and staff feel about their primary education, I feel like if I was to take that and put it on a larger scale, I would get a lot of the same answers. So let's talk about the essay itself. I titled it Color Me Smart, Color Me Educated, as a reflection of racialized attitudes, of the idea that your skin tone can determine the quality of education that you receive. I began it with a poem. It was inspired by Langston Hughes' I Too Sing America. And it talks about the longing for minority individuals to want their cultures to be celebrated, to want their history to be celebrated, to want to know and want to learn and know more about themselves, a deeper understanding than what they are given. I juxtapose that with a story that talks about my high school U.S. history teacher. And the first lesson he gave on February 1st was how Black history is American history. And he luckily was not afraid to talk about some of the lack of diversity and inclusion in American history. But there's an issue in separating Black history and American history, and this is something that the paper talks about, and this is one of the primary attitude that I'm trying to attack in this paper is that separation encourages segregationist attitudes, the idea that Black and white don't belong together, so much so that there has to be a designated time to learn about Black history, a designated time to learn about any other minority's culture, and that has effects on the confidence, the academic achievement of minority individuals, and that puts them at a disadvantage when it comes to their white counterparts. This quote from Marcus Garvey says, "A people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." And Marcus Garvey is a prominent Black figure that I learned about in college, who's often demonized in American history. He was the leader of the Black nationalism movement, the Pan-Africanism movement. He was a civil rights activist, and he really advanced Pan-African philosophy. And so this quote in itself really reflects the attitude that I'm trying to give in this essay, that without knowing your past history, without knowing your origin and your culture, you kind of lack what education aims to equip you outside of the classroom, that confidence, that understanding where you come from and knowing where you can go. There's a few things that I want to highlight. One is this excerpt from The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. It talks about the idea of a double consciousness and how minority individuals in America are forced to see themselves in two ways, through the eyes of others, society, and being able to stay true with themselves. And we always live in this dichotomy, and that is a stress in and of itself. And Du Bois talks about the issues in that. It also includes an excerpt from the same text that talks about how the South implemented strategies that have ripple effects to today in order to stop the education of Black people, because they believed an educated Negro to be a dangerous Negro, in the words of W.E.B. Du Bois. I used linguistic double consciousness, which is a article that we all read, as support for my argument, and I used it because they used a quote that states, if we hold a group in low regard, we hold their language in low regard. And of course we all know that that essay was about language in particular, but I believe that that same logic can be applied to other aspects of life, and that includes history and culture. If we hold a group in low regard, we not only hold their language in low regard, but we also hold their history and culture in low regard. And that, of course, has effects on the success, the academic achievement of minority individuals. So here Marcus Garvey gives another quote. It is by education that we become prepared for our duties and responsibilities in life. If one is badly educated, he must naturally fail in the proper assumption of practice of his duties and responsibility, because the Negro has been badly educated. So he talks about how lack of a quality education and a lack of understanding your history and culture make for failure, because you are not equipped with what you need to in order to survive in our society. And so here is another excerpt. I give a story here about talking about Brown versus Board of Education with my godmother. But this quote really highlights the essence of what I'm trying to get to. And it's from Malcolm X in Racial Separation, which is a speech he gave in 1963, in which he talks about how housing integration failed and how the same failure came when we attempted to integrate schools because of white flight. And if you guys are familiar with that term, it means when Black folks move in, white folks move out. And he says that it made us fall to the same level of slum school, which we thought we had escaped. And so one of the primary things I use as support for my argument is the Black-white achievement gap and how it has persisted since Reconstruction. And the Black-white achievement gap is basically disparities of education amongst Black individuals and white individuals. And so the National Assessment of Educational Progress is a report given by the Department of Education, and it talks about how Black individuals do not achieve educationally as well as their white counterparts. And some of the reasons that is because of lack of quality education, because of lack of having your history and culture. It is because Black people are not given that confidence to be able to carry on for the rest of their lives. And so what I ended with before I give my conclusion is the Ode to the Only Black Kid in Class, which is a poem by Clint Smith. He was a Harvard doctoral candidate when he wrote this poem, and it became famous quickly after he wrote it. And it just talks about some of the attitudes within the classroom that he had to deal with, of course, being a Black Harvard doctoral candidate, and some of the things he even encountered as a child. And so that poem itself provides insight into how oppressive attitudes within the educational system can be internalized by minorities, by minority children in particular, and that can hinder their success academically, which can hinder their success economically, because as I said earlier, education gives you access to better opportunities and allows you to make for better decisions in your life. So I hope that this video has been helpful to you. I look forward to reading what you guys have talked about, and I hope that this essay provides good insight to what it means to not have an inclusive education when it comes to culture and history. Thank you so much.